Right. Good evening, members. It's now 7:15, so we'll start our planning committee meeting. Today's the 2nd of June. Welcome to members and welcome to officers and welcome to all members of the public here. It's lovely to see so many people. So we'll now move on to item. Well, actually, first, before I do that, I'd just like to welcome Councillor Butland, who is a new member of the committee. Now move on to items on the agenda. The first item is apologies for absence. We have one apology this evening, who's Councillor Finken. He is being substituted this evening by Councillor Ayton, so welcome Councillor Ayton as well. Next item agenda, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest or other registrable interest relating to items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a couple on the same application number. So, application number, agenda item 5C 2502777, Hubbards Farm, Shalford. The first declaration is as a member of Shalford Parish Council. Now, the Parish Council minutes will reflect that I left the room whilst they considered their response to this. However, I have a DPI, and it's a private declaration I've made to the monitoring officer, and therefore I will leave the chamber and I will not take part in a debate or vote. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Anybody else? I see no hands, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. I have here the minutes of the meeting on the 12th of May. Do members wish to for me to sign those as a correct record? Move Councillor Holland, Councillor Abbott, and seconded Councillor Holland. All those in favour? Okay, that again unanimous. Thank you, members. I will just sign those. Right, the next item on the agenda is public question time. We don't have any registered speakers on this item, so I will now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the planning applications. Members, you're aware we've had a lot of interest in item 5C on the agenda, application number 25/02777 for Hubbards Farm, Shalford, and I think there are some members of the public here who are interested in that item. So to avoid them having to wait and sit through the other items, I'm going to bring that item forward as being the first item which we are going to consider this evening. So I'll let Councillor Ritchie leave, and then we'll move on to consider that item. So this is application number 25/02777 full. This is at Hubbards Farm, Shalford, and it is on page 168 on your agenda. So we do have some speakers on this item. So the first person I'd like to invite to speak is Mimi Croft. If you'd like to come to the table there, and when you're ready, press the speaker button on the right hand side, and you have 3 minutes to read your statement. Thank you.
When Grove turkeys began operating in the 1970s, the environmental impacts of intensive poultry production were not yet understood. In 2026, the evidence is unequivocal. Intensive poultry production increases airborne ammonia and particulate matter, and the health effects of these pollutants are now established medical fact. They include elevated risks of strokes, lung cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, asthma, and impaired lung development in children. Shalford Primary School lies less than 400 metres from the proposed barn, and the village has a high proportion of elderly residents, both groups particularly vulnerable to these contaminants. The planning application is directly linked to a concurrent Environment Agency application to house 109,000 broilers at the site. However, the planning statement does not appear to mention the Environment Agency application at all. It also fails to acknowledge the inevitable increase in stock removal and resulting rise in HGV movements and traffic. To my knowledge, no relevant traffic impact statements have been undertaken. It may therefore be assumed that the biodiversity statements were prepared without awareness of the proposed increase in poultry numbers and turnover, and are consequently based on incomplete or inadequate information. Furthermore, a concrete road has been constructed, apparently without a planning application. This road cannot reasonably be considered permitted development, as it lies within 25 metres of a trunk road, within 400 metres of dwelling houses, and is likely to be used for livestock-related purposes. It actually passes approximately 12 metres from one home and within 100 metres of 2 listed buildings. Its construction is particularly notable, given that section 3.2.4 of the planning statement states, "The proposals will utilise the existing access of the site off the main road through the existing farmyard." Intensive poultry units generate large quantities of waste, which in turn produce the harmful pollutants already described. Yet on the planning application form, when asked whether the proposal includes areas to store or collect waste, the applicant answered no. When asked whether the proposal involves a disposal of trade effluent or trade waste, the answer was again no. These responses raise serious concerns in the light of the concurrent Environment Agency application. Given the omissions, inconsistencies and possible breaches of planning regulations, I implore the committee to reject this application.
Thank you very much, Ms Croft. So the next person who wishes to speak on this is Joe Lazarus, if you'd like to come make your statement.
Chair and councillors, I speak on behalf of Communities Against Factory Farming. Local objectors remain concerned about this application. We raised 2 issues in objection. First, the inadequacy of the information submitted. Second, serious animal welfare concerns that have yet to be addressed. While the applicant frames this as a very simple principle of replacing an agricultural building, the documents tell a different story. The current building houses 5,000 turkeys, but the ammonia assessment states the replacement building will accommodate over 26,000 chickens. The planning officer's report is therefore incorrect in stating that the application does not propose an increase in the number of birds. This is a materially different operation in terms of stocking density, manure production, ammonia emission, ventilation demand and environmental impact. It reflects a substantial change and increased intensity. More concerning still is that the true scale of the proposal remains unclear. The planning statement does not specify the number of birds, and a separate environmental permit application refers to approximately 109,000 chickens across 2 sheds. These inconsistencies are not minor technical errors. Bird numbers directly determine the scale of environmental impact, again reflecting key material planning considerations. These uncertainties have direct implications for local amenity and the surrounding environment. Concerns related to odour and traffic cannot be properly assessed if the site's true operational intensity remains unclear. The impact of traffic on residents has been neglected, and the committee cannot dismiss the increase in intensity. Residents are concerned about real-world consequences. The unit is just 225 metres from residences and 350 metres from Shalford Primary School. There is no explanation of how ammonia and hydrogen sulphide emissions will be controlled, and the officer's report states that no fixed heating or cooling is proposed, nor is there an explanation regarding ventilation infrastructure. For nearby residents, these emissions release strong odours affecting everyday life and enjoyment of their homes. Intensive poultry units like this one also release particulate matter, a dangerous air pollutant that causes chronic health issues like respiratory disease. Finally, we ask the committee not to overlook the issue of animal welfare, which is firmly established as a material planning consideration. There is no animal welfare assessment detailing the bird's breed, plans for better welfare, or information on stocking density. Factory farms like this one typically use fast-growing breeds which have high mortality rates, have trouble walking, and suffer daily. At its core, the committee is being asked to approve a materially intensified poultry operation without a clear description of the true scale and environmental effects masked behind a replacement building. I respectfully ask the committee to reject this application given the lack of transparency on bird numbers, which has meant that impacts on traffic, odour, waste, air quality, amenity and animal welfare have not been correctly assessed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Lazarus. Now finally we have a further speaker who is Mr Grove Smith. If you'd like to come to the table, make your statement. Thank you.
Good evening. I am a third generation farmer at Hubbard's Farm, Shelford. Over that period of time, we've always been a mixed farm, mainly arable, poultry, occasionally pigs and cattle over the years. Indeed, my grandfather used to sell chickens on Braintree Market. Next year, we'll be celebrating 100 years of farming in Shalford. Over the generations, we've endeavoured to produce from the plough to the plate philosophy. So we grow the grain and then feed it to our birds and sell them locally and around the UK all year round. This ensures low food miles and good levels of sustainability. In 2019, we gave planning permission to process chickens as ducks, as well as producing on our farm. As farmers and ever-changing demands from customers and with flexibility, we need to respond to the marketplace to ensure that our birds are grown in modern facilities to the highest welfare standards. This planning application is concerned with upgrading a building over 50 years old on exactly the same size and exactly the same. It is not a new building, it is an upgrade of an existing operational agricultural building. The building in this application is no longer able to keep our birds safe from bird flu. In 2025, the closest case of bird flu came in Castle Hedingham. If planning permission is gained, the new building will improve biosecurity, enhance bird welfare, and reduce the risk of getting bird flu. We now have an increasing number of local customers, farm shops, caterers demanding higher levels of environmental and sustainability in their meat production. Changes in demographics and the cost of living mean that our customers require more chicken and duck products and less turkeys. As responsible farmers, we need to meet our customers' demands. We've applied for planning permission, but we've also applied for an environmental permit. So we've introduced a water activation basis to minimise the chance of water potential pollution and improve drainage. We've upgraded the drainage on the site. We've now been granted a full environmental permit, which will safeguard our farming practices and ensure we operate to the very highest environmental standards, which will be monitored and audited by the environmental. However, this environmental permit has attracted the objections of animal liberation groups, which have mobilised mass objections from that application as far away as France, Canada and Australia, most of which have been generated using IDA. These objections appear to be something that we are setting up some huge industrial factory farm operation, which is highly upsetting as we endeavour to produce food in a local sustainable way within the whole farm framework. As a large employer in Shalford, we believe that a strong agricultural business is vital to the rural community and the wider economy. This can only be achieved by continuous investment to upgrade our existing facilities, so we remain compliant and offer our customers what we want. This upgrade of the renewable existing building on exactly the same footprint will have improved drainage, if permitted, will ensure we have the best conditions to grow the turkeys, but our birds. Also ensure the long-term future of farming employment and the rural economy and the community along things, producing food locally in a very strict due sense. I urge you to support the Planning Officer recommends and allow passionate British farmers like myself to grow and produce food and to deliver our customers, which they are demanding and asking for. Thank you very much. On the subject of the road, that's nothing to do with this application. That's something my brother's doing, so that's nothing to do with that. Cool. Thank you very much. Very kind.
Thank you, Mr. Grosso. Could you just turn the microphone
sorry,
off, if you wouldn't
sorry.
mind? Thank you. Right, members, that brings us to the end of our speakers on that item. So I will now hand over to, I think it's Daniel, who is going to present the officer's report. Daniel?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members and members of the public. This application proposes a replacement poultry building and new surface water attenuation basin. Great, that's a good start. The site is located to the north of Garrett's Lane and is within the Hubbard's Farm complex of agricultural buildings. Hubbard's Farm comprises a consolidated group of agricultural buildings, including a turkey processing unit, welfare lairage, farm workshop, grain store and poultry houses, together with adjoining arable farmland. The building to which this application relates was constructed approximately 50 years ago and comprises a detached single-storey poultry shed. Here is an aerial photo showing the existing building highlighted in red, which is well screened by the remaining agricultural buildings within the site. The replacement building would feature the same dimensions and be sited within the footprint of the existing building. This application also proposes an attenuation basin located to the east of the proposed building, which is also highlighted in red on this slide. The siting of the basin would be within an existing arable field and adjacent to an existing pond. Here is the proposed site plan that shows the siting of the building and attenuation basin in relation to the wider site. The proposed elevations show a simple and utilitarian replacement barn that would measure 85 metres by 20 metres with an overall height of 4.9 metres. The proposed external finish would be finished in galvanised steel with roof cladding, which, whilst differs from the existing structure, the design is considered to represent an enhancement of beyond the existing unit. The proposal would maintain the existing arrangement and pattern of development on the site and would not extend the built footprint into undeveloped parts of the holding. Given that the replacement building would be of the same footprint and height as the existing structure, it would not introduce additional bulk or prominence. Here are the proposed sections and floor plan. Officers have made a slight amendment to include the plan references outlined within Appendix 1, just for additional clarity. Just to clarify, these are the same plans, it's just an additional level of detail. Officers recommend that additional details for the proposed ventilation and mechanical fan equipment proposed for the building are secured by a condition. It is recommended that these details will need to be supplied and approved prior to any above-ground development. Officers request delegated authority from members to agree the detailed wording of this condition with the Council's environmental health team. Here is existing means of access that serves the building and the remainder of Hubbard's Farm. This is the area of Harstading as you enter the site, which serves the wider unit and allows on-site vehicle turning. These images are as you approach the building from the south. Here is the front of the building, proposed to be replaced. Here are some more photographs of the existing building and its relationship with the adjacent structures. These images point out within an easterly direction from the proposed building and shows the proposed location of the attenuation basin, which would, just for clarity, would be in front of the existing pond and tree, which you can see in the top image. In summary, the proposed poultry shed would reflect the scale and siting of the existing unit. The development would replace an outdated structure that no longer meets modern agricultural standards. The new building would be effectively screened by the surrounding cluster of agricultural buildings. The design, scale and overall character would be typical of a poultry unit of this type and would integrate well within the established site context. The proposal would utilise the existing access arrangements. In addition, members will be aware that a number of late representations were made directly to members prior to tonight's meeting. These comments have been duly considered. However, officers consider that the matters raised have been addressed within the committee report. Finally, all consultees, including Environmental Health, the Highway Authority, the Council's Ecology Officer and the Lead Local Flood Authority have raised no objections to the proposal. It is therefore recommended that the application is approved in accordance with the approved plans and documents and subject to the conditions and reasons and informatives outlined within Appendix 1 of the published committee report and subject to the additional condition to require details of the ventilation methods proposed to be agreed with the Environmental Health team. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. So members, Councillor Diamond.
Thanks very much. First, I'd like to thank you for that really helpful presentation. That was really useful. The speakers who spoke tonight were incredibly passionate, and I am sympathetic towards their cause. However, much of what was said seemed to focus on issues with factory farming more generally speaking, and not always something that's very local. And I feel that while factory farming is something we often have very strong feelings about, isn't something that we can decide on, generally speaking, at a planning committee. One issue raised that I did concern me a little was the suggestion, unless I misunderstood the speech, was the suggestion that the numbers used in the reports are wrong and there would be far more poultry than originally suggested in the report. And that, therefore, there will be much more further negative impacts that were originally suggested, and a lot of the mitigations would be, therefore, less effective. Could you shed some light on whether that claim is in any way substantiated? Thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for your question. In terms of the number of birds, we also, as officers, sought confirmation regarding this. It's been confirmed that the existing arrangement and the number of birds would remain consistent between the existing unit and the proposed unit. The discrepancy alluded to is in terms of the numbers proposed as part of the environmental permit. Thank you, Chris. In terms of the environmental permit application, which does sit separately to this planning application, typically these type of applications are dealt with in two manners. Essentially, you get the planning permission up front, and then the environmental permit determines the number of birds at a later date, and those elements in terms of like impacts in terms of odour, waste, and whether the facilities can accommodate that number of birds is assessed by the Environment Agency. Hopefully that goes.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. On a similar point, clearly a lot of the objectors and commentators homed in on these numbers. So I'm still struggling with this number of 109,000, which the objectors are saying is in the EA permit, which the farmer said has been granted. So is that explained by one or more of the adjacent sheds being covered by that permit? If not, again, how is that number explained? And in planning terms, surely we would need to know how the waste is being dealt with, which doesn't seem to have been covered off in the consent. Surely that wouldn't fall entirely to the EA, because there would need to be some form of structural system to cover that. So those 2 points, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Abbott. I'll pick this particular point up. So as Daniel's explained, there's two things here. So there is the planning application process, what members are considering this evening, and then separately sitting alongside that is the environmental permit process. So I could not explain to you in detail what's been applied for within the environmental permits and that process, because that sits completely separate from planning. I think you've got to remember here that the backdrop, what you're considering, is a replacement of one building on a established site that's been used for this purpose. The permit could be across the entirety of the site, which we've obviously got no control over whether or not a permit is applied for, what's actually the detail of what's been applied for, the numbers and so forth. So that sits separate to planning. What you're considering this evening is the building, which is detailed within the application submission. So, as I said, leaving the planning application aside, the current applicant could apply for a permit to the Environment Agency and specify a certain number of birds. We have no control over that from a planning perspective, because we've got an existing site here. Hopefully that answers. Well, again, so we're not, as you will see within the recommendation, we're not proposing to condition or control the number of birds that would be kept within the facility. Those are matters that would have to be dealt with and considered as part of the environmental permit. The backstop for us as well is set out within the report. All the statutory consultees have been consulted on this. We've consulted our environmental health team, and they're satisfied on those points as well. So I haven't really got much else to add to what's already outlined within the report in that regard.
Because you think the waste element of it is being covered by the... Well, you don't know.
Yeah, so all I can say, as I said, all I can say, there's a separate process in terms of the environmental permit that would need to be considered by the Environment Agency. That sits separately to planning. The Council's own Environmental Health Department has considered the application, is comfortable that that process needs to be followed, and therefore the conditions that have been recommended by our own internal consultee is restricted in terms of the planning process. And as planning officers, we have no reason to query that particular approach on this regard.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Councillor Beavis, I think hand is next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I just also wanted to thank the officer for the presentation and also for the helpful comments this evening by the members of the public that are quite concerned about this, but also from the farmers' point of view as well. I thought it was quite informative. And on the slides and on the previous papers that we've had, it's quite clear that we're not entirely sort of replacing like for like, because it seems to me that the building is going to be modernised so that it's fit for purpose for its sort of new intention, which to me seems to be slightly different to what we've seen historically. But as Chris Padgett said, that's not really a planning consideration. I mean, a bit of me, and I don't like doing this, and I'm really, keen to listen to other members. A bit of me this evening feels that I want to defer the application. A bit of me feels that, simply because I'm just not convinced that the modelling is there around proper odour modelling and the public health considerations and the actual bird numbers. And the other thing I just wanted to ask, with the, I think you called it the attenuation, is that an attenuation pond, isn't it? And so that's new. So if we're replacing something like for like, what is the difference now then by having, because there must be a difference, and I just wanted a bit of clarity on that. So I'm not going to move anything. I do have some concerns that I think probably can be answered in the fullness of time, but I'm not convinced that everything that I feel I need this evening is in front of me, if I'm honest. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, if I could just come back.
Yes, please, Dan.
In terms of those comments, first of all, I'll deal with the attenuation basin. That is essentially just in terms of rainwater runoff. Essentially, when the building was built originally, we didn't have the standards that we do today, and it's quite typical just to deal with those sort of flows to make sure that the rain's not essentially coming straight off the roof and causing disruption to the landscape. So that's what the reasoning for that. That has been assessed as part of the application by the lead local flood authority as well, and they've confirmed they're happy with that, subject to the conditions that are outlined. In terms of the intensification, we've gained that clarification from the applicant that the use proposed would be the same as what's currently operating. In terms of that, obviously we've assessed it on that basis, and in terms of the point regarding odour and ammonia, etc., that has been assessed via a third-party report, essentially, which has modelled these things. That modelling information has been assessed independently by our own ecology officer in association with Place Services Ecology as well, just to gain clarification on that. And they've found that it was below the 1% significance level. So in terms of impact on the wider ecology receptors, particularly like the SSSI, Bovington Hall, that was found that it wouldn't meet the threshold to require additional information in that regard, and they were satisfied with the documents that were submitted, hence the recommendation. That's good.
Next I have Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Daniel, for your report. Could I just double check something on the access? I know in the report says that the proposal will utilise the existing access arrangements. We have been sent photographs by some of the objectors of a new concrete road. I heard very clearly the applicant, Mr. Grove-Smith, said in a statement that that is actually nothing to do with this application. So are you satisfied that that is correct, that that road is not going to be used for vehicles going to and from the poultry farm? It's something completely different. Is that right? Thank you.
Yes, in terms of the road that's been built, essentially it's outside of the red line of this application, so it in no way does it affect the determination of this committee. It is something that we will be following up in terms of whether enforcement action is required, but as I say, it's not directly related to this site, essentially. Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that, Daniel. Councillor Schwer, have you next?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this planning application is interesting, and I think the facts and figures that we've been given and the request to replace this building on exactly the same footprint actually is an improvement in animal welfare. Not only is the environmental permit very strict, which has already been granted, but I think one needs to bear in mind that the the actual standards of modern welfare with regards to livestock, especially chickens in these sheds. And I do know because, and I'm speaking from experience here, as I have a few farming friends that have similar sheds like this, that the welfare of these birds is very important to all farmers in producing it for very obvious reasons, and that these buildings are designed to handle not all aspects of the welfare, but also to reduce the odour. And I agree with the subject to the additional condition about the fans and the ventilation. That is really important. But otherwise, I think the officers have set out very clearly in the report that this is just about replacing this shed on the basis and the use of and the traffic which is all existing. But this will ensure that actually from an agricultural and farming operation that the welfare of these birds will have the highest standards, and from a point of view of not only environmental but also care as well. And I think that's critical to understand. And it should be noted that also this application has had no objections for any of the statutory consultees. It's also been approved by the environmental permit that's already been granted, so that a lot of these conditions with regards to the environmental conditions have been met. So I'm very happy to consider, and with your permission, Chairman, I would be happy to move officers' recommendation on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schwitt. Does that find a seconder? It's Councillor Spray. Do any other members wish to speak? Councillor Abbott.
Just as a point of fact, Madam Chairman, in response to Councillor Schwar, and as someone who knows people who keep chickens in different environments, the highest animal welfare standards I think you'll find are where chickens can roam outside and are not confined to sheds.
Councillor Holland.
Sorry, members. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is to officers. Officers are proposing an additional condition, and that condition, as we've seen this evening, the wording used is they're seeking additional details for ventilation, mechanical fan equipment, and that is secured by condition. Can I ask whether the standards that those aspects, and I presume also some degree of filtration, meet, is set down in legislation or by national standard, whatever, and is the purpose of this condition, if agreed to ensure that the ventilation and mechanical fan equipment meets a specific criteria before this council signs it off?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Holland. So I'm very conscious, obviously, with the representations that have been made on the application. Since the publication of the report, we've just given some further consideration to this matter. So members will note that this wasn't a matter which was recommended as a condition by the Council's Environmental Health team. We don't have the details that have been submitted with the actual application itself. I think, given the concerns, we can cover it off through a condition. I think that is reasonable and meets the test for a planning condition. However, the reason we're seeking delegated authority to consider the wording is so that we can have that detailed conversation with Environmental Health to make sure that the wording of the condition is appropriate and it's worded in a way that we're requiring the right details. So I couldn't advise you this evening in terms of what specifically and the exact wording, but that's why we're essentially seeking that the ability to take that away and make sure that Environmental Health are able to input into the wording of that condition. And then when those details, subject to obviously the committee's decision, but if those details then in the future come forward for submission, we'd be then seeking advice from Environmental Health. So that's the other reason, because we would need specialist advice, I think, on those matters. We would not have the technical expertise ourselves within the planning team to review it. We would want a consultee to review the detail.
That's good.
Hopefully that's that answers the question.
Very reassuring.
Thank you. Would any members like to see that condition, suggest additional condition, or are you all happy? Obviously, we've got the recommendation up on the screen, but do you want to see the, just remind ourselves of the additional condition, or is everybody happy having seen it already? You've got it, haven't you? So you've got it, probably you've already got it on your laptops. Okay, in that case, has been moved by Councillor Schweer and seconded by Councillor Spray that we grant this application in accordance with officer's recommendation. Could I have a show of hands on that, please? Those against? I think that's everybody, isn't it? No abstention. So that application has been granted, albeit not unanimously. Thank you very much, members, and thank you very much to members of the public for your attendance at this application. I'll just wait for Councillor Ritchie to come back. Somebody can get him. So members will now go backtrack to item 5A on your agenda. This is application number 01534. This is Gershwin Park land north east of Reed Road in Witham. We don't have any speakers on this, so we'll move straight to the presentation, which is going to be given by Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So this is an application which came before most of the members at Planning Committee in December, when it was moved for approval subject to completion of a Section 106 agreement. There's been some events that have happened in the intervening period which have needed to be sorted out, and to do that in an appropriate way, we've needed to amend some of the list of conditions, the approved plans, and also the heads of terms for 106 agreement. As officers, we're quite comfortable with all of that. It sounds perhaps a bit more ominous than it is. It arises principally from highways issues, as I'll discuss as I go through the presentation. What I will do is just briefly go through the presentation for the whole scheme, because obviously we do have a couple of members who weren't with the committee on the original presentation in December, so we need to make sure everybody's familiar with it. So it's a full application, it's a mixed-use scheme, so we've got up to 264 square metres of retail space being provided, a 72-bed care home, 65 residential apartments and dwellings, alongside access works, parking and landscaping, and this is all at Gershwin Park, which is land north east of Reed Road in Witham, so part of the Maltings Lane development. So this is the location plan with the red line. So for bearings, we've got the Aldi supermarket over here, Hatfield Road running past the front here, sports pitches which were provided as part of the Maltings Lane development there. The community centre, which is being built with Section 106 and council money here. It's under construction at the moment. And then this is Gershwin Boulevard coming into Maltings Lane. So past the supermarket on the corner, we've got a public house, restaurant, a children's nursery here, and an office building for a housing developer. So we're looking at this parcel here, which has been allocated for development for some time. There's probably three distinct phases to the development, so it's all one application, but there's different elements to it. So just briefly touching on each of those. So there's a care home in this section here. So this is the 72-bed care home, which has its own access and parking, as you can see down here. And we've got a mixed-use building here. So this is a three-storey building. So we've got apartments above and retail units on the front here, so fronting onto Reed Road as you come down towards the supermarket. And then over here, 19 bungalows, which will be age-restricted accommodation as well, and an area of public open space up here. So the retail unit and the apartment block first in a bit more detail. So these are the retail units, as I said, at the front here. Apartments above, amenity area for the residents here, and then we've got parking to the side, an existing substation here. As we'll come back to later on, one of the issues has just been around the frontage here, and the Highway Authority were wanting to make sure that the width of the existing pedestrian cycleway was maintained. The scheme that we had before us before impinged on that slightly. So this is the revised scheme, which probably, certainly looking at it on the screen up there, but even on a plan, isn't significantly different. But that's probably one of the changes, or sorry, is one of the changes on here. There's also a slight change here with the entrance into the car park. That's been altered slightly again in light of highway comments, but again, probably not an appreciable difference. Then we've got some CGI images from the original presentation, just showing the appearance of the building. So you can see the apartments above, retail units on the front. So this is looking from Reed Road. Looking from a bit further along Reed Road to getting a slightly different perspective of the front of the building. Looking from the northwest, from the car parking area, and from the east, from the other side, from within the residence gardens. And then wider context, we've got street scene drawings. So this is the building and the area we've just been talking about. And then next to it is the care home here. And then the other street scene here, we've got the other elevation, sorry, one of the other elevations of the care home and the bungalows there, just to give you a perception of how it all hangs together. So the care home, again, separate parcel of land. Again, residence gardens provided. The gardens will be designed to be secure to make sure that residents are safe. Residence parking, staff parking and visitor parking to the front there, with an entrance that's shared with the apartments, the flats over the bungalows over there. And then some more drawings showing in slightly more detail the care home. So I think it's fair to say, as you'll remember, officers acknowledged that the developer had gone through quite a long design process to address officers' concerns about design quality and build. And we think the finished result as officers is a strong one in terms of design. It's obviously a considerable building, but the selection of materials, the different elements, the protrusion, the articulation, all provides visual interest and breaks up the mass, and we think works successfully. And then over towards Owers Road. So these are the bungalows, which again will be age restricted, as will be the apartments above the retail units. So you can see access in here off the roundabout, coming in and just a loop around. So you've got a mix of either on-plot parking, some of them next to the properties, some broken up off the street but landscaped to integrate. So we think, again, the layout works successfully. And here's some images to show you some street scenes showing the bungalows. So again, some variations in materials and tones, but a sort of carefully put together composition, we think. So there's landscaping across the site. So primarily it's to either the residence gardens or the care home or the amenity area to go with the apartments. There is an area of open space just up here at the top next to Owers Road, and there is the provision within the Section 106 agreement that if the Town Council wish to take that, that will be offered to them at the appropriate time. And if it doesn't go to the Town Council, if they decline the offer, then it will be managed by the management company responsible for the development. And we've got some photos of the development, of the development site, I should say. So this is from Drury Road, looking west. And we've got, this is one of the turning heads. So one of the turning heads, I should say, that I pointed out. So that's the substation that I pointed out on the layout plan. That's there already. This is the existing turning head or entrance into the site. So when the roads were put in, they were put in accordance with the master plan that was approved some years ago. Some of these roads envisaged, the master plan envisaged, I should say, more significant roads being provided to provide access to parcels. Obviously, as the development is coming forward in a different fashion, the roads that were envisaged by the master plan are no longer appropriate, and that's led to some of the existing highway being re-engineered to fit in with the development that's coming forward. And this is, as you can see, is a very wide, you can see with the van part there, it's a very wide turning head at the moment. So not surprisingly, that's being narrowed, but it's the extent to which it's being narrowed as part of the development which has changed since the original application. And then just moving around the site, this is coming down, so this is coming down towards Drury Road. You've got the Persimmon office over there, and then this is looking up over the site to the houses further up there. And then we've got Owers Road, so this is the site on this side, primary school on the opposite side of the road, and some housing facing opposite. And then final views from Owers Road. So in terms of the update, this is quite a wordy slide, so I'll just move on in a moment. But one of the issues has been that the plans that came before you previously, for those to be able to be built out, that would have required the stopping up of highway rights on some parcels of land which were within the application site. So the applicant was perfectly within their rights to make an application. When you apply to stop up the highway, you apply to the Secretary of State. So it's not the Highway Authority or the District Council that determine that. So after our planning application came through in December, the applicant, who was very keen to progress the development, made their application to the casework unit who deals with it on behalf of the Secretary of State. They consulted the Highway Authority, a slightly different part of the Highway Authority to the one that we deal with the planning applications, and unfortunately there was an objection from the Highway Authority at that time. So there was a process whereby there could have been, that could have been dealt with through probably quite a long drawn out process. As I said, the applicant's very keen to get on and deliver the scheme. So what the developer, or the applicant, and the council and the county council have tried to do is find a way forward which satisfies the Highway Authority but also allows the development to come forward. So if I just show you this plan, this is probably the most graphic way, and this wasn't included in the presentations that were circulated, sort of late edition, but the hatched areas are the areas of land where highway rights were proposed to be changed. So you can see up here, that turning head that I was showing you earlier was very wide. It was always envisaged by the applicant that it was going to be narrowed, but what the Highway Authority wanted was it not to be narrowed as much. So it's small details, but important details to the Highway Authority. And from the applicant's point of view, they don't want a planning permission which they can't build out. We obviously don't want to grant a permission which they can't build out. Hence, we've taken the time to try and sort it out now. So hopefully, if we can get an approval from members tonight, the applicant can go away and proceed with the development, and we can all move on. There's basically four sections. So one was this area here with the turning head. So the solution there has just been to change that entrance into the car park slightly. So it's slightly wider than the applicant envisaged originally, but narrower than it is at the moment. This area here, this has been this has been dealt with, I should say. What's happened is the planters have moved back. So there's some planters in front of the retail units. They've been moved back very slightly. So that allows the 3.5 metre wide foot cycleway to continue past the site. This area here wasn't a contention or a disagreement. This area here was, so this goes into the application site, and this was a problem because this does need to be lifted for the development to actually work. What's happened is the Highway Authority and the applicant have agreed whereby a turning head will be provided further down on Drury Road. So the issue here was, although it was never designed as a turning head, it was, as you can see, designed to be part of a roundabout with the master plan. What this does at the moment, the Highway Authority say, is it gives the ability of vehicles who come into Drury Road, suddenly realise it's a dead end down here, nowhere to go. They can reverse back to this point and turn and then come back out onto the highway network in forward gear. The way around that is the applicant is putting in a new turning head down here. They've got a separate planning permission to do that, so it's not dealt with by our application. But with that, when that turning head is provided down here, the Highway Authority will remove their, have confirmed they'll remove their objection, and the highway rights can be listed from that stretch there. And then this tiny sliver here, which you can probably hardly see, that's been adjusted, so the applicant has moved the landscaping back slightly into their site, but again, it's not probably a perceptible change that you would notice in terms of the layout. To deal with all of those changes and to overcome the Highway Authority's objections, that has meant the plans have needed to be updated, so we've listed them all there. But as I said, I think most of the changes are pretty slight and don't significantly change the scheme that you saw before. And then the other change is on BNG. So just to cover this off, since the application came to committee, the Local Plan Subcommittee have taken a decision as to what is deemed to be significant in terms of BNG, where a developer is providing it on site. Based on what the applicant is intending to do, so it's not what we're approving, but intending to do, the BNG is likely to be considered significant on site. There's a provision already included within the heads of terms for a monitoring fee to be paid, because where there's significant on-site BNG, the council are required to monitor it over the 30-year period. What we needed to do was find a way to make sure that the BNG details which we approve by condition are actually implemented. So we've added an extra condition just to cover that. The reason for dealing with it by condition rather than legal agreement is in the hopefully unlikely event that we would need to enforce, we can enforce far more easily against a planning condition than legal agreement. So that's the simple reason for doing it by condition and adding it this way. The applicants also asked for a minor change to condition 13, just to make it clear that the condition is related to one of the phases. So as officers, we've got no issues with that. Condition 16, when the report was written, we were unaware whether all of the highway changes, including the parking spaces in front of the retail units, were approved by the Highway Authority. They've, since the report's been published, confirmed that they're happy with those amendments, so we don't need that condition anymore. So we're recommending condition 16 is deleted. Condition 26 is amended just to refer to phasing, similarly to the one before, so again, no issue with that. And then condition 42 is the new BNG condition. So as you can see there, it's just saying the development approved shall be implemented in accordance with the details that we approve when we approve the biodiversity game plan condition. And then they're required to set it out, manage, maintain and monitor in accordance with the approved habitat management monitoring plan. So the summary is there again. I won't run through it all, but basically we are in development boundaries here. This is a site that the council's wanted to see developed for some time. The planning history has stretched on a little with these proposals, but there's been a lot of work done by the applicant to get a scheme together which officers are happy to recommend for approval and which we think is a high quality scheme, as was shown in the images that we showed earlier. There's no outstanding issues from consultees, so we think we're happy to recommend approval with the revised approved plans, the revised conditions, and an additional head of term, which I didn't cover off, and apologies. So we're just looking to cover off the highway works to control that, to make sure that the highway rights aren't lifted until the right highway mitigation has been put in place. So we're just covering that through an amendment to the heads of terms. So the heads of terms to change, the approved plans updated, and the conditions updated as well. But other than that, it is as you saw before and members were happy with, and we hope very much that you will be again tonight. I hope that's been helpful in terms of a whistle-through presentation, but obviously any questions, happy to try and help. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. I'm sure we'll all agree that was extremely helpful explanation. It's not complicated. Okay, members, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we all remember the members' evening that we had for this application. I believe it was very well attended as well on that evening, and a real thorough run-through of the proposal from the applicant. I think the first thing I just wanted to say is thanks to the applicant for persevering with this. It has been a a long process, not helped by the changes made or needing to be made to the highways issues that, although the minutiae, the detail in the eye of a layperson may seem very, very minor, obviously to highways it's a threshold that needed to be crossed, and I think they've done well to meet that threshold to get the application to this point. At the forum evening, I strongly remember a number of members commenting on the quality of what was being proposed and being brought forward in this application this evening. I think housing accommodation like this is needed to an aged population, of which this district is becoming more and more exposed to. And obviously McCarthy Stone, when they were here making their representations, they have a good track record of supplying high quality developments such as what's before us this evening. And I think it will be a huge benefit to the residents of Whittam as well. Coupled with the mix of the retail units as well, I think what it does do is it offers a showcase for a high quality development for people to change their living criteria from either being a separate householder in a detached complex into a complex whereby they can have a bit more of a community feel, but also maintain a standard of living whereby they have got the option to go to retail outlets. And whilst there was nothing named at the time, certainly at the members forum, it was envisaged things like hairdressers or cafes would be the type of retail that would attract. So I think what it does do is it offers an extended quality of living to people who will be looking to move into a place like this. I think it's a very good submission, and I would support officers' recommendations this evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Spray.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I just want to echo some of what Councillor Ritchie has said, because well done to officers, our officers and highways officers, and also to the applicant for working our way through this. One of the most frustrating things for this committee is when we have a really good application before us and we give permission and then nothing happens. And sometimes it's because of a developer simply doesn't do anything on the site for their own reasons. Here you've got a developer who obviously desperately wants to get on and build and complete this, but there were some things getting in the way of that. So it is really good to see that those problems have been overcome, and yes, as Councillor Ritchie said, very well done to them for persisting with it. I think it's going to be enormous benefit to the district. Really good mix, care homes, some residential buildings and some retail. So very pleased to see this come back in the way it has. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. Councillor Shrew.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to echo also the comments of the previous two speakers, but I think also what was really good about this application, and again, thanks to not only the officers but the developer bringing this forward, was the amount of landscaping here. It's going to make a real difference actually to the environment and be really helpful to the volume of build that's going in. But over and above that, it's good to see that we are going to be, or effectively the BNG is going to be looked after for 30 years. So it'd be good to see that in place and see how that unfolds effectively, because that's going to happen a lot more in the future. But also the recommendation of the mix actually of being able to have different health facilities at different levels and different expertise and level of care all on one site, with some of those facilities for retail as well is going to be really huge, and I think that is quite significant. And a lot of us have been through this process all the way, and I just want to echo those comments again. But this is great, and I'm very pleased to see that they want to get on and build it, because it's going to be a huge asset, not only for the build and construction stage and potential employment, but also this will filter out to the whole of the district and the local area and be a huge benefit to all the families and the communities. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands going up, so would anybody like to move officer's recommendation? Councillor Ritchie, and a seconder for that, Councillor Spray. So all those in favour of officer's recommendation That is unanimous. Thank you, members. So that application has been granted. So we'll now move on to the next item here, which is item 5B on our agenda. This is application number 25-02230 REM. This is land at Mount Hill, Housestead. And we do have a speaker on this application. It's Mr. Jones from Denbury Homes. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is David Jones and I'm a senior planner for the applicant Denbury Homes. Denbury Homes is a local developer with 40 years' experience of delivering high quality, traditionally designed developments throughout Essex and Suffolk. As you will note from your officer's comprehensive report, we have worked collaboratively with officers and key consultees during the determination of this reserved matters application. This has ensured that the proposal is of the highest quality and meets all the requirements of planning policy and of the Outline Planning Permission. In accordance with the Outline Planning Permission, the scheme proposes 55 homes, including 17 affordable, with a broad range of homes including semi-detached and detached houses and wheelchair accessible bungalows. Each of the homes complies with the nationally described space standards and M42 lifetime home standards. Extensive areas of the site are devoted to managed public open space, totalling approximately 3.3 hectares, or 60% of the site area, including a locally equipped area for play, or LEAP. The scheme has been vetted by a broad range of statutory consultees, including the Highway Authority, Lead Local Flood Authority, Waste Services and your Ecology, Landscape and Heritage Advisors, all as set out in the committee report. The affordable homes are properly integrated within this attractive and well-designed development, and your housing officer is fully supportive of the proposals in meeting identified needs. In accordance with Condition 4 of the Outline Planning Permission, details of compensatory tree planting are submitted for approval. The Outline Planning Permission approves the removal of 57 low-quality Category C and U trees, and in compensation, 112 new trees will be planted across the site. The ongoing management and irrigation of these trees is secured and would be implemented by the site management company. All higher quality Category A and B trees are proposed to be retained, and the layout includes these as focal points in the design to ensure their protection. This is a green development that would provide highly energy efficient, zero carbon ready homes, each with an air source heat pump, EV charging point and water conservation technology installed. The potential for construction impacts on the environment and neighbouring residents will be managed through the production, or the preparation rather, of a detailed construction environmental management plan, and we have already commenced discussions with the neighbouring care home in response to their comments raised to the application in this regard. The scheme delivers significant financial contributions to health, education, outdoor sport, habitat mitigation, community facilities, libraries, allotments and cycling infrastructure. This is a development which washes its own face and mitigates its impacts. I confirm that we are committed to delivering this development using our local contractors, with initial site access works due to commence later this year. Clearly, I commend this development to you as a high quality, characterful, sensitive scheme deserving your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much and well timed. Now, I'll move on to the presentation, officer's presentation, which is going to be given by Harrison.
Thank you. Good evening, members. So this application concerns a reserved matters submission in respect of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, pursuant to the outline permission granted in 2023 for up to 55 dwellings, together with a new access and area of public open space. So the site is located to the west of Mount Hill upon entry or exit to Housestead on the A131 and is contained between Blampsters Farm to the northeast and Housestead Hall to the southwest. The northern portion of the site slopes down to an area of woodland and public right-of-way within the open countryside, and directly opposite the site is Oak Road, which forms a residential area on the fringe of Housestead. Members will likely be aware that this section of Housestead opposite has been subject to recent residential development in the form of the Oak Road development approved in 2018 and the Bournebridge Hill development approved last year and currently under construction. Just prior to going through my site photos, there's some important context, which is the approved parameters plan. So a condition on the outline consent required that the development would be carried out in accordance with this parameter plan, which really sets the guardrails for this reserved matters submission. This parameters plan was established at outline stage with reference to some of the site sensitivity, which includes tree impacts and heritage impacts. You can see a large area of public open space proposed to the north of the site, and then the brown area marks the developable area, which includes the proposed access point from Mount Hill to the south. You can also see that the plan includes landscaped edges to the fringes of the area and retained trees, including 3 within the developable area. So moving on to the site photos, this is the view from Mount Hill looking towards the site frontage. You can see the entrance to Oak Road about where the cursor is there, and then the railings to the left mark the boundary to Housestead Hall. This is a view of the eastern boundary of the site on approach to Blamsters. So the Blamsters site is to the left of the image, and then the site boundary for this application is to the right. The trees that you can see there beyond the red line, so would all naturally be retained, and you can see the existing residences directly in front, and the entrance to Oak Road is just to the right of that as well. This is a view, well, you'll notice a change in seasons here as we move into the site, and that's because I undertook one visit at submission in November and then a later visit just before this committee. So this image just shows a perspective from within the site looking northwards. The larger trees, which you can see to the boundary over here and further within the site, would be retained, and then the smaller trees directly in front of the image would be removed, forming part of the tree group G17 against the original outline consent. And their removal was secured against the outline consent, and at the time of the most recent visit you'll also see that some early tree removal has also taken place. So moving further into the site, you can see more clearly the retained tree, the most prominent of which is the horse chestnut here and then the lime behind, as well as some of the surrounding western portion of the site. The boundary to the northern area of public open space is also visible in the background as well. This is a view of the retained lime tree and looking eastwards across the northern perimeter of the site. And then moving into the area of public open space, this image is taken from the northwest of the site looking northwards. You can see that the ground slopes away towards the area of woodland beyond the site over here, and there's a public right-of-way that runs through that as well, which is just outside the site boundary. There's also expansive countryside views in this section of the site, as you can see. And then lastly, from a similar vantage point, looking eastwards back towards the developable area, which is marked by this fence line here, you can also see the existing pond area over here and the surrounding trees, which will be retained within the area of public open space. So moving on to the proposed layout, you'll see that it respects the approved parameters plan with the large area of open space to the north and then the landscaped fringes and a setback from Mount Hill to the front of the site here. The retained trees are also successfully integrated within the development, creating a feature of them, particularly within the western portion of the site over here, where the dwellings all surround them. And officers overall consider that the layout is legible and coherent, with the main spire road being tree-lined up to the area of public open space. So I'll just cycle through a couple more of the layout plans now. This one shows the affordable housing, which you can see has been integrated successfully within the development and forms a key part of that Spine Road street seam. 17 of the 55 are affordable homes, comprising a mix of 11 affordable rent and 6 shared ownership, and BDC's housing officer has commented that the mix is fully appropriate to the housing need and is supportive of the application. This plan now shows the external layout and boundary treatments. So the layout and design went through multiple revisions, and this proposal now secures garden sizes which are in accordance with Essex Design Guide standards, as well as appropriate back-to-back distances. There's also strong natural surveillance throughout the site, and brick boundary treatments in areas where amenity fronts public space, such as surrounding this western portion of the site. And then lastly, this plan just highlights that the main street would be adopted. So the access was agreed at outline stage, and in terms of refuse collection, Schedule 12 of the agreed 106 agreement against the outline requires all roads to be built to adoptable standards and also secures indemnity against damage to private roads or street furniture. And BDC Waste have raised no objection in terms of manoeuvrability and drag distances, and a manoeuvrability and turning plan was also provided. So moving on to the house types, the agent has kindly prepared some street scene elevations to view a range of house types at once. The first street scene is from the site frontage, it shows the access area here. And then the second is a cross-section of the western portion of the site surrounding those two retained trees. You'll see that generally the approach has been to maintain some coherency through a more homogeneous material palette where the dwelling types differ, and then where the types remain the same, such as in this second demonstration down here, a change in materials is utilised. Officers consider that this approach creates a coherent layout, but with appropriate visual interest and subtle variation to avoid monotony. This third set of elevations then just shows the street scene through the main spine road here and some of the affordable homes. And then the last one is from as viewed from the area of public open space, where you can also observe the gap in the street scene for that retained tree. You see broadly the same approach as before, as well as some additional subtle architectural details to further avoid the risk of monotony and introduce some more individual character, such as brick courses on the affordable homes here and various porch canopies. And then this slide just presents a couple more of the house types which weren't visible on those street scenes. So you can again observe the general approach to the material palette and some of the more subtle architectural details to provide some visual interest, such as the coining to this dwelling here and the segmental arches to the ground floor windows. This slide also shows two of the bungalows which weren't visible on the previous street scene elevations. These are concentrated to the northeast of the site, and this position was agreed on the parameters plan to minimise the prominence and harm to the nearby listed building at Blampsters, which is to the northeast of the site. And then the last of the plans now is the landscaping plan, which for the submission was broken into 4 different plans, as you can see in the squares. This master plan shows the general arrangement within the site and the area of public open space. So the key details include the drainage basin, which is located within this area to the north and is the obvious location given the levels difference in this region of the site. And then you can also see the position of the locally equipped area for play, which was secured against the previous Section 106 and outline agreement. And it's important to highlight that as well as the trees identified for retention under the outline consent, an additional 112 are to be planted across the site, with a large portion being in this open area of public space to the north. So in summary, the principle of development has been established under the outline consent, and the appearance, layout, scale and landscaping details are all considered acceptable. There are no objections from consultees and only one representation from the public, which raises traffic concerns. A later objection was also received from the neighbouring care home regarding the construction phase, which will be managed through the submission of a construction method statement required by condition on the outline consent, and understand that the applicant team has also been in contact with the care home since the representation came in. And the council's housing officer and landscape consultants are also both in support of the proposal. Officers therefore consider that the proposal accords with national and local policy and delivers clear public benefits, particularly in the form of the large area of public open space and a suitable housing mix. And the harms from development, including tree loss and heritage, would largely address the outline stage through the agreed parameters plan and do not outweigh the significant benefits. Officers therefore recommend that the application is approved, subject to the conditions against the original outline consent and those contained within Appendix 1 of the published committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harrison. Right, I'll pass it over to members for any questions or comments. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just two, really. On the face of it, this looks quite acceptable. I noticed in the designs of all the houses there is quite a range of mullion and glazing bar designs in the fenestration. Can I just check that that accurately reflects what we expect to happen and there won't be any flexibility around that? And the other thing is, it does appear that there will be quite a significant number of trees going in well away from the actual development themselves to the north of the site. Are we sure that they will be maintained, particularly in early years with watering, given that they'll logically be rather away from sources of water? Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, on the first point, yeah, the house types form part of the approved plans and documents. So yeah, in essence, they're set. We do have some flexibility on the materials because we require a condition for material samples, but otherwise they're as we would approve them. And then, yeah, in terms of tree maintenance, the applicant team have submitted a landscape and ecological management plan, which details maintenance and management procedures, and also as part of the Section 106 agreement, the management company would need to be agreed with the local planning authority after determination of the reserve matters.
Can I just, for Councillor Hooks, can I just quickly follow up on that question Councillor Hollands raised? When I looked through the conditions, it didn't seem to me that they covered water irrigation of the trees. Could you just confirm whether that's covered? And also, would the materials condition cover a colour of render? Thanks.
So on the first point, water irrigation is contained within the LEMP, so that's covered off. And then the colour of the render, we require samples and details of the material. So if it would satisfy members, we could just add a simple line in to include details of colours as well.
Yeah, I personally think colour can be quite important, actually. So would like to see that. Councillor Hooks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having grown up in Housestead, I was quite disappointed when I saw this application first come before us. But obviously I understand that the outline was given before I sat on the committee, so I'm fully aware that it's obviously it's okay to be there. I have recently walked the public right of way that actually goes through the site, or next to the site recently as well. So having seen the designs tonight, I'm actually quite content with it. I was a bit like, it was adding on to the size of Housestead yet again, and like it's that last infill bit of land between, you know, the care home and that edge of the town. But it does fit in quite nicely, and there is quite a lot of open space, which is opening out into that public right of way that then goes off to Russell's Road. So I just want to say, like, yeah, well done on a nice application, because initially I was disappointed that it was there, but actually I can agree with it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooks. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Yes, as these type of sites go, I think this is one of the better ones we've seen. I am, though, concerned about the tree losses. How many times do we hear developers say that the trees they're going to remove are low quality? Well, from what the photographs the officer, I haven't been on the site, so this is, you know, an observation from a distance, but those groups of trees the officer said are going to be removed. Yeah, is it that whole group in the foreground there? Yeah, they don't look that low quality to me, and I say, looking from a distance, and that's a sort of default developer position. So that's disappointing, but on the other hand, it's a credit to them that some of the larger trees are going to be retained within development, and the development's being built around them. I only hope they survive that process, because infamously on the site in Witham Town Centre they didn't. Most of the large trees that were required to be retained, many of them TPO'd, no longer exist. So hopefully that's the case. On the watering, I think that's a really important point. So tonight on my way here, and I often come different ways to check, I had a look to see how the trees were getting on the new developments in Cressing, and it's terrible. The street trees, I mean, if you want to see low quality trees, that's where, I mean, they are absolutely terrible. Some of them are dead, some of them are just about alive. Now, I know we have the rule that they have to be replaced if within 5 years, but if you're taking out trees like that, which look relatively healthy, and you're putting new ones in, you've got to make sure that they go in the right conditions and that they're watered. I think watering is, particularly with these hotter, drier springs we're getting, is critical. That said, the large area that's being set aside for open space with more planting is very welcome. You know, we don't often see that generous an area next to a development, so that's good. I was a little bit perplexed by the developers saying the houses will be zero carbon ready. I'm not really sure what that means. I mean, they're either zero carbon or they're not.
Thank you, Councillor Robert. Does anybody need to come back on the lighting question?
Yeah, I can come back on it. Yeah, so I think the point in 7.73 was from our ecologist. So I think her phrasing is typically below 1 lux, and then we've got condition 7, which will require further details. So yeah, we can essentially look when they look to discharge that condition to get it in as good a position as possible, basically.
Thank you, Harrison. Councillor Bevis. I'm looking in the wrong direction. You're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I just ask whether due consideration has been given to the space that will be required in terms of waste collection? From we are now bringing in the need for room to be made available if we want the public to do it, and I wonder whether there is a feeling that that is adequately covered. And I noticed there are quite a few private drives, and there have been difficulties in some areas with private drives and accessed by our waste vehicle collection lorries, etc. So I'd be interested to know just whether time and thought has been given to that. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, time and thought has been given to it, and it's been something that's sort of moved iteratively through the revision process. So in terms of the private drives point, I think we're honouring the original Section 106 agreement where the indemnity was secured to allow refuse vehicles over private drives. And then in terms of the collection points, they're generally positioned, so we have spoken to our waste team, and they're generally positioned within areas, well, under the drag distances that are required, but in certain areas, for example, down here to the bottom of the site, in areas where there is adequate turning. So the applicant team provided a turning plan for these key areas that demonstrated essentially that refuse vehicles would be able to manoeuvre in and out of those areas. And then in areas where that's not possible, so for example up here, the bin collection points are positioned to the front of the access, and then the drag distances are below the required distance.
But on the actual premises themselves, basically, bluntly, have people got room to put the new bins? Because we want to encourage people to do it. And if we're, we don't want to be building buildings that don't allow that to take place.
Yeah, so that, I must admit, that's not something that we've explicitly highlighted or discussed with the developer. But I think we would be content that there is sufficient space on site for that. This plan in particular shows the points where the bins would be stored.
Okay, thank you, Carison. Who was next? I think I had Councillor Bevis next, actually. And then.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to and I'm underlining it as I'm saying it, to say that word again, you know, overall, I think overall, we are delivering a good site here, and I do believe that. But there is a lot of history, not only on this site, but in this area, and that's, I'm sure, going to play out in the local plan process. And I particularly wanted to thank Neil Jones, because I know how much work is going into this area, and over the years, myself as a member of the planning committee and Councillor Mundy and Neil have walked fields, roads, looked at trees, and always kind of excavated this site. And I know how much work has gone into this, and I think overall it's delivering a good Section 106, and there's a lot to come out of this site, and I will be supporting it. That said, I took a look at some of the houses which are opening in Housestead this weekend, which is very close to this site. And my golly gosh, I can't think of a friend or family member of mine that are going to be able to afford to buy one. I literally can't. And I know, because I know Housestead very well as well, and I know a lot of people in Housestead. And so I know a lot of people that are buying the homes from the area, which is fine. But what I am concerned about is the pressure on our local health services. And this may be a question as we go through the local plan process, but is the growth of the district keeping up with the offer that we have for health? And I'm still not sure it is, and perhaps need to go back and do a bit more digging myself. But overall, I'm pleased with what I'm seeing this evening, and I think we have come a long way. What I will say is, in summary of that, is on those views, they are some of those, and it's come out throughout the long process of this area, that the long views are to be protected, and I think they are on this occasion as well. But for me, it's just some of the underlying stuff that might be building up in terms of the impact on our local facilities. But that's not necessarily for tonight, it's just an observation. Thank you, Chairman.
Do you want to come back, Chris?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Beavis. Just a couple of points just in reply. So absolutely note the point you've raised about affordability. Obviously, through the planning process, we can't condition how those properties are sold and the market value. Obviously, this scheme, and Harrison's shown on the slides that the scheme is delivering affordable housing, and we've worked very hard. Well, I say we, Harrison has done all the hard work along with colleagues from housing to make sure that that has been successfully integrated within the development, and that's where we can ensure that some of the houses coming forward are being delivered as affordable housing. Just on the health point, I think it's important just to recognise this is a Reserve Matters application. The previous outline would have secured a contribution towards health, and obviously we are reliant on the NHS as a consultee in the process to outline the mitigation required, and that has been secured. So we have discharged our duty as the planning authority to ensure that that mitigation is secured. Obviously, the local plan, separate matter from this evening, and in terms of any future growth proposed as part of the local plan, again, that will need to consider what mitigation is required in relation to that. But I think given what members are considering this evening, it's important to focus on the detail of what's before you, while obviously acknowledging the wider issues that you raised, Councillor Beavis. Hopefully those comments are helpful.
Thank you. Next I have Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I find myself agreeing with a number of points that member colleagues have made this evening. Just to pick up on a point that Councillor Abbott made about the retention of the larger trees. In the report, is it strong enough to ensure that there's enough construction mitigation around those trees so that they do not become damaged during the construction phase, just to try and give them a sporting chance of surviving that? I mean, it's clear from some of the indicative layouts that there does seem to be adequate distance between the two buildings that are next to it. However, we know that sometimes during construction phase, accidents do happen, and I think it would be wise to see if we could do anything just to ensure that no damage does occur to those trees, so that they do actually stand the test of time through the construction phase plan and remain on site in a good state. I think the second, my only other comment is a shared comment that Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Beavis made. This is a good site in as much as the green space around it is really, really expansive. We don't very often get a development like this whereby almost half of it is mirrored by open green space. Now, whether that's coincidental because it can't be developed or for whatever reason, but I still think it will offer a huge benefit to the residents once the development has come forward and is ready for occupation. I think the residents will benefit immensely from being able to have a vast space literally on their doorstep, close to them. I think what that also does as well is it actually forms a reasonable buffer between that and other houses towards the back of Russell's Road and adjacent to the road that runs into Gosfield as well. You've got that nice green buffer that hopefully fills in that piece of land and stops any kind of further speculative development from occurring on the land. But yeah, I'd just be interested in officers' comments around whether or not we could just afford anything in the application comments tonight just to assist with the protection of those larger trees. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the first point I'd highlight is that was quite a key part of the revision. So the blue lines that you can see there are the root protection areas for the trees. So the only slight incursion is to the south of the site here with this turning head. And our landscapes officer considers that can be covered suitably in the arboricultural method statement that's required. So then the second part to that is that the arboricultural method statement is required by a condition on the outline. But then as a condition 6 on this proposal as well, pursuant to that, we're requiring an arboricultural supervision as well, so that it will be monitored during the construction to further safeguard, essentially.
Thank you. Councillor Schwer, I have you next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I won't go over a lot of the comments that are made, but I just would like to compliment Councillor Butland on picking up the question that I was going to again ask officers, as we frequently do at most of the applications that are now coming through, which is all about bin spaces, and are they able to be placed there, and is there going to be space for future proofing and all of that. So this is what we have been doing that effectively for more than a year now, so I'm glad to see that cause being taken up. My question really is with regards to the sustainability of the buildings, if there would be an opportunity to have an informative, not necessarily for solar panels on there because of its context and landscape, but if there's the opportunity to ask the developer to look at solar tiles, which are coming down rapidly in price and are very efficient and would actually go with this development very well. And of course the other thing I think we need to take into account with all developments now is water and the scarcity of it in Essex going forward, and the hookups and the connections taking into account industry. This needs to be, I think, considered by our officers at every planning application. Thank you.
So just to come back, firstly, happy to add the informative, certainly. And then on water efficiency, we have got condition 9, which sets out the requirement for water efficiency, which the developer will have to meet as well.
Yeah, thank you, but obviously we need to keep the water usage per household as low as possible going forward.
Can I just ask one further question? I'm sorry if I missed this, Harrison, but is there any information on the market housing mix, the size of houses? Have we covered that? Whether it's 2-bed, 3-bed, 4-bed, 5-bed?
Yeah, I think predominantly they are 3 and 4 beds. I think there's 2 5-beds, which you can see here and here, but otherwise I think predominantly 3 and 4 beds.
Okay, thank you. It's good to see some slightly smaller houses as well for first-time buyers as well. Okay, anybody else got any further questions they would like to, or comments they'd like to raise? Councillor Monday.
Just to say that I don't disagree with any of the comments from other members this evening. For me, it looks to be quite a nice development, a lot of open space. I quite like the informative from Councillor Swear. I mean, they're doing solar fencing now, but I think that's a bit of a stretch away. And quite honestly, I think a lot of thought has been put into this development, and I'm quite happy if members are in agreement to move officer's recommendation with the informative.
And also, is that with the addition of the word colour to materials? Is that you happy with that too?
That's fine.
Okay. Councillor Beavis, you're happy to second that. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of granting this application? Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Right, we now come on to our second last application this evening. This is item 5D on your agenda. It's application number 25/02846 out. This is land south of Witham Road, Cressing, and that's to be found on page 189 of your agenda. And we do have a speaker this evening. I don't think I need to look up your name, Mr. Spencer. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. I'm Olivier Spencer, the agent for the land south of Witham Road, Ty Green, Cressing. The site is located on the edge of, but outside the Ty Green settlement boundary. However, the council was unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and we estimate there's a shortfall of 1,800 dwellings. Therefore, the tilted balance set out in the NPPF is engaged. The proposed development will deliver substantial social benefits and moderate economic and environmental benefits. These include up to 120 new market and affordable homes to meet identified needs, and public open space that exceeds the council's adopted standards. Construction-related employment and increased expenditure in the local area, and the scope for extensive new tree and hedge planting on site, and SUDS features with an extra 40% allowance for future climate change. The committee report accepts that the proposals are within walking and cycling distance of local services, facilities and public transport, and that this is a reasonably sustainable location for new housing. Allowing new homes at this site will reduce the need to release land in other more remote and less sustainable parts of the district. The proposals can contribute financially to health, education, outdoor sport, allotment, bus service and library improvements in the local area, and these can be secured via a Section 106 agreement in due course. It is also notable that only 7 written objections have been received from local people, an extremely low number for a scheme of this size. The perceived impacts of the proposal relate to heritage and landscape and visual harm. According to the applicant's expert, any impact on heritage assets will be limited to the lower end of less than substantial harm. But the council's heritage advisor concludes that the impact will cause a mid to high level of such harm, which is questionable given that there will be no direct impact on any of these assets or their immediate setting, and considering that the application site only forms one part of their wider rural setting. The applicant's landscape expert found the proposals would create a moderate neutral impact on landscape character, and no worse than a low adverse impact on visual receptors. The council's landscape consultant disputes some of these findings, but irrespective, it is commonplace for greenfield sites to generate at least some landscape and visual impact. A precedent was established last year when the Planning Inspectorate approved plans for 78 bungalows to the southwest of Mill Lane. Therefore, Mill Lane should not be treated as a physical barrier to future growth. The committee report also refers to a perceived overdevelopment of the site, leading to poor levels of amenity. However, the illustrative master plan exceeds the standards set out in the Essex Design Guide and the Braintree Open Space SPD. Furthermore, at 23 dwellings per hectare, the density of the development is relatively modest and not an indication of overdevelopment. In summary, the limited adverse impacts do not outweigh the significant benefits of the scheme, and we therefore respectfully request that members overturn the officer recommendation and resolve to grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spencer. So we'll now come to the officer presentation, which is going to be given by Melanie.
Good evening, members. The application before you this evening is an outline application with all matters reserved for up to 120 dwellings. I won't read out the rest, you've got it there on the screen and within your published agenda. The application site is shown here on the next slide. So to put in context, we have Whittam Road, so Braintree up to the north here, and Cressing, and then the countryside site that wraps around the listed building known as Horbush Old House. We have Mill Lane here, and some members may know the Builders Yard that is just located down Mill Lane. We've also then got Horbush Green to the top here, and then my next slide will actually show an aerial photograph, but you'll be able to see there's open countryside to the south. So this puts the site in context with the wider development. So this is the application site here, shown by my cursor. To the north, this is the listed building known as Horbush Old House, and the area of land surrounding it. To the north is the countryside site. This is the Builders Yard referred to previously, and then we've got Horbush Green here, and then the main road running to the right-hand side here down to Whittam. The next plans show some parameter plans. I think as set out within the officer report, none of these are subject to approval. They've just been submitted for information. So we have a parameter plan here. We've got an indicative master plan. So we can make out the main road is running along the top here, listed building to the left-hand side, Builders Yard down here, and then the development shown with an access off of the main road. We've also been provided with an illustrative street scene and also tree protection plan. The next few slides show photographs of the site. I apologise if there's too many, but there's quite a lot of angles to take from. So these photographs here are views from Whittam Road, looking towards the northwest, and the site is this area here, and then beyond this hedge line where my cursor is here. These photographs are taken with views across the site from Whittam Road, looking to the west and the southwest. Again, these are from Whittam Road, looking across the site, and you can just make out this is where Horbush Green is here, so we're getting closer to the junction with Mill Lane. This bottom photograph here is the junction with Mill Lane, so the application site is here on the left-hand side. This is Horbush Green with the application site lying here where my cursor is. You can just make out the road sign here for Mill Lane. This is the listed building, or the site of the listed building, and it lies just behind where these dark trees are. This photograph here puts it in context in terms of where it's set back from the road in both directions, and then is then quite heavily landscaped to create that distinctive edge to the edge of Cressing. These photographs are across the site, so where I'm standing is just at the junction of the main road and Mill Lane, looking across the site in a southwesterly direction. This next slide, this top photograph here is again across the site, looking southwest, and then also then along Mill Lane. The junction with the main road is just behind where I'm standing taking the photograph. These photographs are actually along Mill Lane, so you can make out the roof line of the new properties in the countryside site. And these are looking in an easterly direction. These are further along Mill Lane, so you can make out just behind this hedge and tree some of the dwellings within the countryside site. This bottom photograph is looking along Mill Lane towards the east, and the application site sits behind this hedge on the right-hand side. Excuse me. These two photographs are taken at Horbush Green, so you can make out where their junction is on the main road, and the application site sits behind. These two photographs show the dwellings in Horbush Green, and this photograph here, as you can see, the properties in Horbush Green, but also the Mill Lane junction on the main road. So, by summary, this is an outline application for up to 120 dwellings. Members are advised that all matters are reserved and that the detailed submitted plans are indicative for information only and would not form part of any approval were the application to be approved. As set out within the officer report, the application site is located beyond the existing development boundary and is not proposed for allocation within the local plan review. It sits on land designated as the countryside, and therefore the proposals conflict with policy LPP1 of the adopted local plan and policy 7 of the Cressing neighbourhood plan. Turning to the planning balance, as set out within the officer report, the proposals would lead to less than substantial harm at the mid to high level to the setting of Grade 2 listed Horbush Old House, the bakery and apple tree farm, and an unjustifiable harm to the Henge 300 metre ENE of New Barnes Farm scheduled monument. Given the significance of these assets, great weight must be afforded to their conservation. The application site occupies a transitional settlement edge location within the B18 Silver End farmland plateau and falls within parcel 4B of the 2015 settlement fringe evaluation, which identifies the land as having a medium-low capacity. The proposal would result in the permanent loss of an agricultural field and the extension of the built form into the countryside, altering the character of this settlement edge. Overall, the development would give rise to adverse landscape and visual effects, and as such, the proposals are contrary to SP7 and LPP 67 of the adopted local plan. The proposals would also result in an unacceptable intrusion into the countryside south of Cressing beyond Mill Lane, which would be harmful to the character of this part of the village. Further harm would be created by the overdevelopment of the site, resulting in poor levels of amenity, as demonstrated by the illustrative master plan. The proposals would conflict with SP7, LPP1 and LPP 52 of the adopted local plan. Required planning obligations have not been secured, meaning that development fails to demonstrate the necessary infrastructure mitigation, including healthcare, education, transport, libraries, habitat mitigation and open space would be provided. Overall, the identified harms arising from the development are considered substantial and outweigh the identified benefits. As such, officers recommend that outline planning permission is refused. And therefore the recommendation is for planning permission to be refused as set out in the reasons within the committee report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Melanie. So, members, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is in the ward I represent, along with Councillor Bob Wright. If we were to grant this tonight, then it would take the total number of houses either built or with planning permission in a non-key stage village to about 1,000. And although in the officers say about previous developments and appeal decisions and previous consents within the village, most of them were not within the village. They were on the edges of the village, which is expanding outward and outward and outward. And this would be yet another, like onion rings, this would be another layer, jumping Mill Lane, which clearly goes into open countryside. So in terms of sustainable access, given the local facilities, so there's no GP surgery in Cressing, there's no main shop, there is a small convenience shop, but there's no secondary school. So if you want to do a job, have any sort of employment, apart from a few local jobs, you've got to go out of the village. If you want to access the GP surgery, you've got to go to either Silver End, Whittam or Braintree. If you want to do a main shop, ditto. It's a very unsustainable location. I know that's not a reason we'd be given, but I'm going to say it because it is. This would be an incredibly car-dependent development. The walking distances to the limited facilities there are up towards the 1 kilometre level, and that's, from my experience, the sort of levels where a lot of people won't walk it, they will drive it. So in terms of countryside impact, notwithstanding what the agent for the developer said, it jumps Mill Lane along the B1018, and when you're standing at the Horbush Green, that area of green as the roads wrap round it, it is a very rural environment. It would clearly be a major incursion into the countryside to build to the south of Mill Lane. And I was thinking about this the other day. Developers say, well, our bit of land doesn't matter if we build on this. But I can almost imagine them saying if there's one field left, it doesn't matter if we build on that. Whittam's coming northwards, Cressing's coming south, Braintree's coming south, Silver End's going in all directions. We're losing so much countryside in this area. And the impact it's having on everybody's everyday living conditions are very significant. And the biggest one of all is traffic. So traffic backs up now through Ty Green from Millennium Way and what we call the Garden Centre roundabout near Gallis Corner. Pretty much that's a regular occurrence. And obviously as you add more and more developments, that's going to happen even more. In terms of the local plan, this site isn't in it. It was rejected during the local plan process that we're currently going through. And as I say, it would add very significantly to the already large number of developments going on in the area. It does affect, and I know this is a key planning issue still in the MPPF. I mean, a lot of things have been weakened, but heritage assets haven't. It's still a very significant material consideration, and there are a number. And I thought the comment in the officer's report about the listed building on Mill Lane would effectively become surrounded by development if this was allowed. It would lose its setting completely. In terms of traffic, there's also a lot of spin-offs from all this development which are not actually talked about much. So everyone talks about Gallis Corner, and rightly so, but there are a number of very significant pinch points, such as down at Cressing Railway Station, which is a significant distance from this site, by the way, and also Bulford Mill Lane. I mean, if anyone knows that, how narrow that is getting more and more traffic from all the developments in the area, and that is affecting people's quality of life as well. So, taking it all considered, Madam Chairman, I think it's absolutely right that we should reject this development. I can't think that there's many villages in the district which have had such a rapid and such a substantial amount of development as Ty Green. And I come back to the point I made earlier on that the idea that these developments have been within the village, those of us who represented the area or like Councillor Bowes-Flint have lived in the area for even longer, remember not only just a decade ago how big the village was and how big it is now. And this would just continue that process. And in the end, of course, you haven't got a village anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to speak certainly to support very much of what Councillor Abbott has already said, but one of the things I'm always looking at when I look at these applications is I'm trying to answer the question, what would it be like to live there? And one of the things I'm absolutely convinced of living in a ward full of small communities that actually work is that community is really, really important. So I want to focus more on looking at the issue of community building and adding to existing communities. And for me, in addition to the points already made, one of the things is this looks isolated. It is not, if you take it away from the context of this particular village, when you see a development like this, which is not well integrated, there are no good walking routes that exist. My recollection is that you couldn't walk on a footpath into the main facilities. Am I right? I have to ask those who know better than me. And so you end up in a situation where if you grant consent for an application like this, no social facilities, no community building facilities, and you're saying, well, it's bolted onto the side of an existing community. No, it's not. This will exist in isolation. This is going to be dormitory land. This is going to be the sort of development that leads to atomisation of people, not community building. And that, frankly, is my key consideration. It's one thing to deal with these issues just as a matter of, does it conform to this policy? Does it obey those rules? But beyond all of that, what are we trying underneath it all to deliver? We're trying to deliver homes, community. Community actually helps build well-being and also actually keeps down costs to wider society and socialised costs. We know that's true, so we should be making sure that the things we consent will deliver to objectives of well-being and community building. And to me, the biggest single problem with a proposal like this is it does not integrate. It will sit outside and literally just be a place for people to bed down at night. And on that basis, there's no way I'm going to support such a proposal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor Diamond.
Thank you. Given our housing crisis, I would usually want to vote for 122 new homes, particularly some are affordable. However, I do have issues with this application. You quite rightly meant that this seems isolated and would have poor connections into the village. My question would be, I've got two questions if that's okay. My first question is, could the application be adjusted to increase links, walking links into town? Would that be, into Pressing even, would that be in any way possible? Or if that's not possible, then oh well, and then I'll be able to vote for it. My second question would be, you mentioned the obligations have not been secured. Is that simply because of the stage we are in planning and where it sits within the planning stages? Or is it because the applicant even is unwilling?
So going to your first point about walking, in terms of the walking distances to the services that exist in Cressing at the moment, say the primary school and the convenience shop, those walking distances are there. They can't be shortened, unfortunately, without moving the site closer to the centre of the village. And in terms of your second question with the Section 106 agreement, is that because officers were minded to refuse the application, we didn't enter into discussions with the applicant to do with the Section 106. It's not that the applicant is unwilling. That if should an appeal be submitted, then that's where at that stage when those discussions will happen.
Thanks.
Oh, in terms of walking from the site to the facilities, you would need to, the indicative master plan shows a footpath that brings you up to the top corner of the site where Mill Lane abuts the junction with the main road. You would then have to cross Mill Lane to then join up to the footpath that's on the other side of the road. If I just show you the photograph, I'm sure I've got one. I've got enough. I should have one. Probably the one photograph that I didn't include. Let's see, it's a bit in the distance. So unfortunately what you can't see, but I'm definitely sure it's there, where that the road sign is, there is a footpath that runs along there, but to get to that point you would have to cross over Mill Lane.
That makes my decision much easier, thank you very much.
Okay.
Any other members wish to make any further comments? Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's good to see that I'm not the only old relic in Cressing and that we are preserving some of the buildings, and 3 of them are in this very area. Mill Lane has got 2 parts to it. It goes round in a loop. And if you get to the other end of Mill Lane, it is developed. It's highly developed and been developed for a long while. This end of Mill Lane has never been developed, and there are reasons why it's not been developed. And as you will see from Mel's photos, which she stops flicking, there's not a footpath there. So if you was to try and get from that site to the station to work, which an awful lot of people I assume would do, you've got to take your life in your own hands every time you do it, because that road is not straight. That road is a quiet lane. That road is falling away at the verges, as you can see, because of the amount of heavy traffic that's gone around there, and that happens in the countryside. But the traffic still speed round there, and it used to be a lovely walk to go around there, because halfway round was a duck pond, and as a child I was taken, and people who've lived in the village a long while have always gone for a walk round the duck pond. Nobody walks there now because it's so dangerous. So these people would be put at risk if they tried to walk from there to the station every time. It would be hideous to expect them to do that. And not only that, the road is dangerous. But when we talk about isolation, it will definitely be isolated where it is. But the countryside, to a certain extent, what Councillor Abbott was saying, the countryside estate is actually isolated because that's away from the village, and you're actually making this even further away if you was to grant that kind of thing. And I have to say, I heard the speaker say that there's only 7 objections. I can tell you why there's only 7 objections. Because Councillor Abbott will well know that the people of Cressin have thrown the white flag in. They've surrendered. They've surrendered because through planning inspectors, more than this council, have had so much development put on them in a small space of Cressin. It is unbelievable. And they've got no more fight in them now, Madam Chairman. They have literally given up. And that's why you've only got 7 objections, because those people have still taken the time. But I can speak on behalf of them people in Cressin, and they have given up because they are just sick and to death of development all around them. And no green fields, no open spaces left. And every single field has got planning permission or a planning application on it. It's hideous for a tiny little village with no amenities. But because it's got a railway station, that's the attraction. But getting to that railway station is not easy. It's got parking for 3 cars. It's crazy. So I couldn't never support it in a million years, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beresford. Councillor Abbott, do you want to say?
Yeah, just very briefly. Could the officer put back up the indicative site plan, please? Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So just picking up on what Councillor Beresford just said, that is absolutely right. So during the, I know it's a separate issue, but it's the same point. During the local plan consultation, I encouraged people to take part in the local plan consultation, and Cressin was the source of most of the comments that I saw saying, what's the point? I saw it many, many times. People just feel, what is the point of engaging in the planning process when it just gets overturned anyway? Cressin's got a neighbourhood plan. It's been completely ignored. Coming back to this, one point I didn't make when I spoke originally, but I think it's important. If you look at the site access, if you're turning left towards Braintree, the visibility is relatively good. You're watching for traffic coming from the Whittam direction, albeit that it comes fast. It's 40 miles an hour there, but it'll often come faster. So that's the first thing I'm saying. This is not a 30-mile-an-hour zone. But if you're turning right, you're watching for traffic coming from Whittam, you're watching traffic coming from the Horbush Green Junction, and you're looking for traffic coming out of the Mill Lane Junction. And anyone who knows that junction knows it's a bit like a lot of the local junctions. It's a bit like Dodgems. You're sort of waiting, can I go? Am I going to avoid something? You're looking in all directions to make sure that you're safe. That would add another layer of risk and drivers having to watch what they're doing all the time. So I would be very surprised if that junction was deemed to be safe. I certainly wouldn't want to try and pull out of there at peak time, but I'd be particularly concerned also for anyone else using that junction. It would make it into an even more complicated spread junction, if you like. And I think that's an additional point.
Okay, if I can just come back on that. So members may well be aware that this application is for outline planning permission with all matters reserved, which is fairly unusual. We normally at least get access demonstrated at this stage. Within the transport assessment that was submitted as in support of the application, a detailed access layout was submitted, and the Highways Authority have looked at that, assessed it, and they are happy with that access arrangement, hence why there isn't a reason for refusal in terms of highway access and highway safety. So that within that TA, the transport assessment, the applicant has demonstrated that that access is suitable, and the Highways Authority haven't come back and haven't raised an objection to it.
Could I just say, yes, I thought you'd say that, and I know it's not a reason for refusal, but from local knowledge of using those junctions, we know what it's like, and they can say it's safe, but I know it's adding an additional layer. I think so, it's a bit like I said last night at the seminar. It's the difference between what's modelled and the real world. And for those of us who live in the area, these junctions and the queuing is becoming more and more and more, and it's a real issue affecting people's lives.
Councillor Bassfint, you wanted to quickly come back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to come back. Just quickly on that point, on that very junction, there's been fatalities on that actual junction where people have come up to Mill Lane and tried to get out into the B1018. And I go back to the years when I represented that ward, and I made objections to the county council, and they told me that their words, there had not been enough fatalities to warrant it a dangerous junction. I rest my case.
Yes, I think we've had discussions about that sort of thing on other matters as well. Is any Councillor Ritchie, do you want to make a quick comment?
Yeah, just very briefly. So I've heard a lot of passionate reasons why we should be refusing this evening, but just to bring it back to the planning balance that the officers spoke about earlier, I think what we need to rely on, and I think certainly at the test of an appeal, is that we are opposing this because of the level of harm that it would cause to some of the Grade 2 listed buildings and the scheduled monument in the area. I think my challenge is to throw down the gauntlet to any planning inspector who would want to push against that, because I think given the amount of development that has happened in that area, and given that this is one of the only parcels of land left in that area, we need to do everything that we can do to protect some of the speculative developments on land grab, developments that people are trying to, or developers are trying to impose on an already overcrowded area that's been overdeveloped, as mentioned by some of the committee colleagues this evening. So with the planning balance reasons that have been outlined by officers this evening, I'd like to hope that we've got more than enough that we would need to defend the case for refusing this application this evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, I don't see any other hands going up. So would anybody like to move the officer's recommendation? I've got lots of people wanting to move it. I'm going to let...
Can I move officer's recommendation, to be clear, on the basis of the reasons set out in the report?
Correct, and second, Councillor Bassfint. All those in favour of approving officer's recommendation? That is unanimous, members. Thank you very much. So that application has been refused. So we just have one further application which Chris has been eagerly waiting to present. His TPO application. This is item 6A on your agenda. This is application number 26/00889 TPO, open space at Maylands Drive, Braintree, which is coming for us. This is a BDC bit of land, I think. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And yes, that's correct. The application has been reported for property reasons, as the land is owned by BDC. So we are over at Maylands Drive, Washall Drive in Braintree, so on White Quartz Estate. Several trees proposed for works, 4 oak trees and 1 horse chestnut tree. As members would have noted from the report, the inspection was undertaken following notification from the County Council requiring some clearance works to be done in relation to a couple of the trees. However, during the visit, our arboricultural officers assessed other trees that may need work doing to them. So that's why there's a number of trees within this as part of a sort of proactive approach to managing the council's tree stock. I'll just run you through the plans, and we've got some photos as well. So you can see the various areas outlined in red on the plan, and on the more detailed plan you can see the specific specimens which are outlined in red. So the trees are situated within public open space, managed and maintained by the council, and in this case they're protected by TPO. Majority of trees have received little to no management works and would have been protected as they were present prior to the construction of the residential area. So this is going back obviously some time. Specification of works recommended following receipt of the Section 154 letter from ECC Highways. So this is where we're required to ensure there's certain amounts of clearance distances between certain assets. So I think there's a lamppost, for instance, is the issue. And then, yeah, some further works were identified as part of the inspection process, which also included some separation distances to nearby residential properties. So just running through, so we have the first oak tree. So in this particular one, a crown reduction is proposed to reduce to maintain a certain clearance from the structure. So you can see on the photo on the right hand side the proximity to the neighbouring tree. So again, this is about making sure that the tree is appropriately managed and doesn't cause any future issues. The next one, reducing the laterals. And again here you can see from the two photographs just the extension of the tree's branches towards the adjacent garage structure. So again that's the primary reason for undertaking the works in relation to that tree, but otherwise the trees all the trees are in a really good state. Horse chestnut, reduced crown on western side adjacent to the garage but up to 2 metres. Again, issue around encroachment. We have a crown lift for this particular oak, and you can just see the red dotted line is indicating, apologies, the clearance works that would be necessary to comply with ECC. And then the last one, again, you can just see the position of the lamppost there and the need to ensure statutory clearance. So again, there's some maintenance works required. No objections from Parish Council, no other objections. The works are considered to be typical maintenance works within a residential area, and as the custodian of those trees on BDC land, it's ensuring that those works are undertaken so that they don't cause any adverse impacts to neighbouring property or amenity. All the works are considered to be in line with good horticultural practices and wouldn't damage the longevity of the tree. So on that basis, the works are recommended for approval, subject to conditions within the report, but happy to answer any questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much, Chris. Does any members have any comments they would like to make on this application? It seems fairly standard. Councillor Schwer. Thank you, Councillor Schwer. Are you seconding that, Councillor Holland? Okay, all those in favour granting that? Again, thank you very much, members. That's unanimous. So that brings us to the end this evening. Thank you.